All right, welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate. I want to welcome you once more here in the studio this evening, Mr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, who is an economic expert. Thank you once again for coming in.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me here today.
All right, now, as you've seen in the report, it is the first of its kind to have an actual UK-Africa investment summit. And, well, not that they discovered the African continent all of a sudden, but if we want to talk about the significance of the timing for the UK to hold this summit right now, and we know that UK is not the first a nation that penetrates or wants to penetrate the African market. We've seen the Russia Africa Summit in 2019 as well. We've seen the European Union also. So there's been a lot of summits concerning all eyes on the investment in Africa. What is special and different about the UK Africa Summit in particular?
As rightfully said, this is the first time to hold this summit between UK and Africa on investments. Probably this is the right time for foreign investors to invite them to look at Africa and see how they can earn sizable profits from investing in Africa. Africa indeed is most profitable continent for investment, and the rate of return for investors is very good. Maybe the investment decisions, the foreign direct investors, they would consider many factors before entering into any market. Particularly, they have a systematic approach to investment. They would consider all aspects, including the risks, all types of risks, as well as the geopolitical factors. Africa indeed is a rich continent with unutilized resources. There are many things or many factors that make Africa is a popular or a potentially popular place for investment. By way of example, it is very rich in terms of natural resources. The population of Africa, the young population of Africa, provides cheap labor, particularly for the labor-intensive industries. All that makes Africa a popular place, or a potentially popular place to be discovered. Egypt, as you know, is chairing the African Union since last year. And Egypt represents the 55 member states. They all met under one roof to discuss the common agenda, which is mainly investments in environmental issues, as well as the potential agreements or opportunities that could be presented for international investors.
Yes, now, so when I mentioned the timing as well, it just struck me the fact that, well, a lot of economists or economic experts would argue the fact, well, the UK is not quite ready for investment right now with all its internal struggle on the Brexit issue, even though Prime Minister Boris Johnson is like totally ensuring the fact that they will be exiting the European Union at the end of this month. But is it really the time now for the UK, as it's approaching its agenda of exiting from the European Union, that it's ready to start investing, to strengthen its economy by pouring investments into the African continent? Does that have any indication concerning the timing of holding such a summit right now in the UK?
I would consider that it doesn't have any impact on the potential and future exploration of investing in Africa. Maybe through the international business cooperation between UK and the member states of the African Union, they can do many things that is beneficial to UK and to the African countries. They can actually make use of the They can bring the technology, they can bring the raw materials, the components of spare parts or goods that are assembled into the country, the African countries, where they could benefit from the cheap labor and the facilities.
Of course.
And of course, they will have control over the production, and then the final product would be exported again into international markets with the international brands. So this is very beneficial to UK, which the economy has been struggling for some time.
Well, we can't just generalize and say that such markets, the concerning factories and brands and so forth opening up and starting in Africa hasn't taken place. We do see Tunisia and Morocco having successful examples already.
And South Africa.
Yeah, exactly. So from here I want to talk about Egypt as a case on its own. There's a lot of investment opportunities that are available in Egypt, and investment attractions that are available in Egypt that would definitely attract the UK, especially with the renovated infrastructure, and as well as we've got new Suez Canal, we've got new cities expanding on the horizons on different governorate areas. What is attractive to the UK investors here in Egypt?
Egypt has taken several measures in order to make the country more attractive for foreign direct investments. And Egypt, the bilateral relationship between Egypt and UK has been for a long time, and UK is a major trade partner with Egypt. What Egypt made in the last few years, particularly with introducing the economic reform program, Egypt has changed its legislative structure and amended the investment law. The investment law, in fact, was a big hurdle in many instances, which actually did not help investors to pump money into Egypt. So we have a new investment law. We have renovated and developed infrastructure in several sectors. Particularly, we have logistic areas, we have industrial zones, we have huge road project, road and bridges, national project for roads and bridges.
And we've got the ongoing project of Cairo to Cape Town as well, which is going to link Africa together.
So the big hurdle for any direct investment is the infrastructure, and that's the gap in Africa is financing the infrastructure project in order to attract foreign investments. Egypt has done well, still yet to be done. Africa still, I mean, there are still more to be done.
Yeah, well, let's talk on it, because you've mentioned laws as well, and investment laws that are very flexible and direct is, of course, going to make the process very easy for any foreign investor to pour in. When we talk about Africa as a continent, we are talking about at least more than 50 nations, and they have different laws and they have different regulations and legal prospects when it comes to dealing with investors. And we do not yet have this achieved goal of having a common African market that's for long been talked about. How does a whole entire nation, and let's talk about the UK in instance, well, when they look into Africa, are they going to look at Africa as a continent and entirely a whole block, or the interests of what I can do in different areas in Africa? Mind you as well, the economic status in the African continent are not equal. Some countries are very poor, some countries are very advanced, and so forth.
Well, I don't think that UK or any country would look at Africa as one block.
Of course.
Yeah, the member states, the 55 member states of the African Union, as rightfully said, they have their legal regime, different legal regimes, different legal systems, different laws and regulations and practices. But streamlining these regulations, this is what actually is the main objectives of the countries that they need to achieve, and they benefit, or Egypt has taken a very good step and showcased its progress after the economic reform program. Egypt promotes as by way of example, what was done during the last 3 years, and Egypt being the chair of the African Union would help in that very much by exchanging experience and expertise.
Yeah, and I'm talking about exchange in particular here because President Sisi did point out a number of key issues during his speech, and one of them was the fact of stressing that it is important to have a sort of a mutual exchange taking place, and it's not just UK being interested in investing in Africa as a country full of resources and capabilities, but also Africa benefiting from the investment of the UK in exchange. What can Africa do in the UK that will be beneficial for the UK nation, and as well add in profit and sort of add to the development of the country itself, because we're talking individually about each country in Africa?
As a common feature in Africa, Africa is very rich with its young population. The young population is the driving force for any labor-intensive industry. So injecting or building projects, industrial projects in Africa would benefit much from the cheap labor and the infrastructure and facilities. What would benefit UK? They will have cheap products with the highest
agriculture in Africa is very
it's a green field for crops.
Yes, exactly.
So
we get them here as well, and they're quite good.
Oh, really?
Quite expensive as well. Yes.
So the unemployment rate, and if we are talking what are the benefits that an African country would achieve, definitely the unemployment rate would fall with the more projects introduced in these countries, and the growth rate in the economy would definitely, this would be reflected on the growth rate of the African countries, the individual countries' growth.
Yes, well,
economic growth.
Let's talk about what binds these African nations together. What we can think of right now is the African Union. And the African Union has a set of agenda and challenges that they try to achieve, whether it's a 2030 or 2063 agenda.
Yeah, the 50 years.
Yeah, which includes sustainable development and a number of lists. And in the past, it was more of a talk than actual plan on the ground. And well, it's not a secret, and it is very obvious that President Sisi, running for the presidency of the African Union during 2019, was able to actually have a clearer vision where you can have concrete actions happening on the ground, whether it's an example here in Egypt or such summits, because we have not heard in the past of such summits before 2019. There was no direct cooperation and agreements and shedding light on the African continent before 2019. Now we're seeing China rushing in, Russia's rushing in, European Union's rushing in, the US is, everybody's rushing in the African continent. It's not like suddenly they discovered they have resources, but they were taking the resources out and it was not benefiting the Africans. Now it doesn't work this way. Let's talk about the efforts of the president during 2019 from an economic perspective for the African continent.
Egypt, let me just state that Egypt hosted last year the African Investment Forum 2019 in the new capital city. It was a call for the African countries to promote the opportunities and explore what problems that need to be tackled in order to attract direct investment. So Egypt has done its part since it's taken the presidency last year. Similarly, this year when President Sisi met with the 55 member states in the UK, they all met under one roof, and they promoted or they spoke about the opportunities. This summit was attended by major companies, business people, and
there's the European Investment Bank as well, and the African Bank. Yes,
so it's
Bank.
A sound business strategy is to go and invest in Africa because it is sustainable investment, and this would yield good return for the investors on the medium and long term.
Talking about investments in this era, in this decade, is very much different than when we talked about it 10 or 20 years ago. Now everybody's shifting towards energy, clean energy. Everyone is shifting towards technology. So the mentality has changed on how you want to promote yourself or approach a certain nation with investment. Not only that, but since you spoke about the youth in Africa, which constitute a very large percentage, their mentality as well, and they're very well connected to technology and the IT world in general. How do you see that again boosting Africa towards a sustainable development program, which is their agenda in 2030 anyway?
The African Union has its agenda for 2063. So they have many objectives, several objectives to achieve for the 2063 agenda. One, as rightfully said, the youth in the African states provide a very good opportunity for the nation, and these are the real wealth for the nations. So employing the right technology, using the capabilities, the production capabilities in the African countries, this would be reflected on the growth of the economy of the individual countries. And as I mentioned earlier, any investor, any foreign investor would have a close eye on what are the chances for realizing sizable profit or yield on the medium and long term. So, or in different occasions, Egypt promotes the discussions about African countries to be more open to the outer world, to promote its capabilities and showcase the opportunities that they have.
Now, there's among the different key issues that have been discussed during the UK-Africa Summit of 2020 was sustainable financing, infrastructure, future joint investment plan, trade, investment and growth opportunities. All that in light of what is known as the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA. Now, in your opinion, Mr. Hany, how does this help reinforce the African countries?
The Free African Trade Area was a dream, actually, and all nations, African nations, hope that this year, 2020, the operational measures would be in place. So they can benefit, the individual countries, they will benefit by signing bilateral and multilateral agreements
yes,
among
worth
themselves.
Billions.
There are billions of opportunities. So this year, hopefully, that the operational measures would have been finished during the year, and I'm very hopeful that to see the outcome.
Yes, definitely. How is that? Speaking of the bilateral agreements or the multilateral agreements worth billions of deals that have been taking place, the signing of them.
Egypt signed already.
Yes.
Last 3 years.
How is this money going to be allocated, and what is prioritizing the list here? What does Africa needs first, and so forth? We will be talking about that, but allow us to take a look at this report. Egypt and the UK have signed billion worth deals during the UK-Africa Summit of 2020, which ended a couple of days ago in London. We'll be back right after this. Stay tuned.
A number of new investment deals between Egypt and the UK were announced during the UK-Africa Investment Summit held in London from the 20th to the 22nd of January. British investment firms and Egypt's sovereign fund signed a memorandum of understanding with $3 billion worth of investments in multiple projects in Egypt. Another memo of understanding was signed between the UK's Development Finance Institution and Egypt to provide $100 million to help increase their support for Egypt's ongoing economic development. A British healthcare company inked the third deal to invest some £5 million in Egypt to upgrade 2 major healthcare production lines. According to the UK Embassy, the British energy companies regard Egypt as a priority investment market and is actively pursuing a number of greenfield projects and acquisitions in the power sector, with potential investments worth over $400 million. The summit concluded with an announcement by a UK retailer to open approximately 20 British fashion stores across Egypt in the next 5 years. All these new deals will drive jobs and growth in all parts of the UK and Africa. New investments reflect the UK's commitment to build long-term sustainable relationships in Africa. More than 2,000 attendees participated in the summit, including African leaders, ministerial delegations, UK and African business representatives, international institutions, and young entrepreneurs.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on The Daily Debate. Mr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, economic expert. Thank you once again for coming in.
Pleasure.
Well, before we went out to the break, we were talking about a number of agreements that have been signed between Egypt and the UK. Egypt has been prioritizing this period for a number of sectors: education, healthcare. We're talking about a boost in tourism and the importance of tourism, whether it's a direct or indirect sort of impact. If we're going to talk in general about what's beneficial about this kind of agreements that's worth of billions that have been signed between both UK and Egypt, what can you tell us?
Well, Egypt has signed agreements with the UK worth £3 billion in different area, in different projects and sectors, particularly in healthcare and energy. In fact, Egypt has a long relationship with the UK and aspiration that more investment to be pumped into several sectors, particularly in tourism and education. We have here in Egypt Average University, we have many educational institutions, and thank goodness that the flights between UK to Sharm el-Sheikh, they resumed recently. So this is boosting the historical return of the Egyptian tourism to levels that were achieved before year 2010 and 11. So the energy and the power projects are the focus of the investments and attraction for UK investors in the coming period.
We're talking about energy as well, which is a very important sector here in Egypt, whether we're talking about shifting to the energy field, Egypt planning to be an energy hub. We're talking about gas, we're talking about a lot of natural resources that would definitely be piped into Europe and benefit the UK in particular, especially that it's planning to exit the European Union. So if we're talking from the energy perspective, these kind of agreements regarding energy, what do they entitle and how will they benefit the UK? Now we know that it's going to definitely benefit the UK more in this perspective.
Egypt, particularly with the exploration of oil fields and gas field, is becoming a hub for gas and oil in the Middle East and the Mediterranean as well. So Egypt, being a major player in this area, would attract investments from different parts of the world, and UK is another major player that they would seek to seize the opportunities of investing in the power and energy. So we see Egypt is booming in its investment and its projects that are presented to foreign investors in the gas and petroleum area and sector. So my expectation that for the next 5 to 10 years, this would be a very attractive field for investment, for attracting foreign direct investment.
Well, but the atmosphere of investment in Egypt is really doing well, and of course thanks to the maintaining of peace and stability and security in the country. And we're going to talk about the African continent in large, and during the 32nd session of the African Union in Addis Ababa last year, when President Sisi first was running for the presidency of the African Union, he did promise that a lot of reforms and maintaining of peace and security would be taking place during his presidency, and that was proven successful. And if we're going to talk about attracting any kind of investors from outside, without peace and security and a safe haven climate, no investors is going to actually come and invest in your country. How far has President Sisi succeeded in maintaining peace and security, or securing a more better climate for the investors to come in during this period in 2019 for the African continent as a whole?
I cannot agree more with you when you said that peace and security is a major factor for investments. Let's look around the countries around us, the security status and the geopolitical unrest in the region makes it difficult for any investor to enter into the country. But Egypt has played a very important role in maintaining the peace of the country, as well as its role in Africa to intervene and intervene and play a role in keeping peace and stability in the whole region. And the President Sisi he attended the summit in Berlin on Libya crisis, and we see that Egypt has a very good standing on its status for maintaining peace and security in the region.
That's very well said, because I mean that's specifically why I asked this question, because in case people are not aware, Libya is in Africa, so obviously.
Yes, definitely. It's an Arab country in Africa.
In Africa, yeah. Also, on various occasions, President Sisi did always ensure to the African nations that there is an urgent need to go for mega projects and regional projects that will create job opportunities to sort of employ these youth, and then they will not just be an elimination to radical extremist ideologies and terrorism, but also the issue of illegal immigration and refugees. How do you see that coming in together as Egypt is about to just hand over its presidency next month?
Egypt, in fact, tackled over the previous year different critical issues, including the illegal migration, and in several occasions, Egypt has presented solutions for the illegal immigrations. It's not only an issue that is peculiar to the Middle East and North Africa. It's there everywhere, and from poor countries to rich countries. So this item on the agenda I think was properly or adequately tackled. One more issue is promoting the stability in the region, and this is another area for the African countries that each country will not attract investment unless it maintains the security to a good standard. Egypt will, of course, be promoting much of these items on the agenda until it hands the presidency to the next country taking chair of the.
Well, obviously, this agenda has to be keep moving on in promotion.
It's evolving. The agenda is evolving. It
doesn't stop at the presidency of Egypt, of course. It's just a start of going into a new era and phase, and that's particularly why I have to ask you here as well, Mr. Hany, the fact that during 2019, on an economic perspective, how far has investment been going very smooth and successful between the African nations? We've seen a lot of infrastructure projects supported by Egypt in different parts of the African continent. We've seen a lot of trade agreements happening and taking place, and not just happening and taking place, but actually on the ground taking place. And that, again, is boosting and shifting the economic opportunities in the African continent to another level. If you reflect back on the economic progress that has been taking place with this regard within the African continent in 2019, how do you see it?
I will stop at one word that you mentioned here, that the infrastructure in Africa and how Egypt helped in boosting the infrastructure projects in Africa. Egypt has very good experience and expertise in the infrastructure projects and extended hand to several African countries. And I recall at the beginning of the program I said that no investment, no foreign direct investment will come unless the country has the proper infrastructure. And the proper infrastructure needs mega investments, huge amounts of funds that must be made available to help in erecting or establishing these projects. How that would reflect in countries, on the African countries, it would reflect by paving the way or portraying that a country is ready to receive the foreign foreign investments, provided all other factors are maintained, like the security and safety, stabilized monetary system, proper legal system, and most importantly, the level of law enforcement. It's not just enough that you have a good legal system, but the more important is how the laws are being implemented and enforced.
That's very well said. So can we actually then say that this summit that took place between the UK and Africa is possibly a chance or an opportunity for a milestone along the march of to Africa's prosperity in this regard? I mean,
Certainly, I cannot agree more. Yes, you said it all.
Saying from scratch, then this is a new era to have better cooperation on all levels, taking into consideration the exchange of expertise, taking into consideration the exchange of information with regards to maintaining the peace and security of the African continent for a safe haven position, for better economic transformation. Can we say that as well?
Yes, definitely we can say with a great deal of certainty.
That this is the case. How do you see then with this regard, and I know I asked this question at the beginning, but it is very important to see from your perspective as an economist, the future of the relationship between Africa and the UK now that it's not going to be looked at, if they do exit, the Brexit, it's not going to be looked at the same as it was before when it was part of a European Union, dealing with the UK on its own, on an isolated base. Would that make any difference?
I think it will. UK will have more free hand to draw its foreign policy and trade relations with the outer world, and particularly with Africa. Before the Brexit, UK was bound by aligning its position with the Union, with the EU.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking that is because, and I do know that the US dollar is an international currency, and I know I'm very bad with math as well, so just asking you, I mean, sterling pound, what does that equal into US dollars? But why I asked you that specifically because of the currency. It's no longer going to be a euro sort of deals and investments, more of strengthening the sterling pound when it comes to investing on an individual level as the UK alone in Africa. Would that make any difference to because we see the benefit of Africa. I'd like to see from your perspective, how is that kind of mutual cooperation going to benefit the people of the UK? Is it going to be a shift or a move forward? Is that going to possibly say, well, it was a good decision you actually decided for an exit because we're doing much more better on our own economically than we were before?
The people just voted for Brexit. So
they're having quite struggle going for it, though. We're going to see how that's going to...
I don't have a strong feeling about the exit of UK from the Union, but I think they decided their own fate, and they can decide what is good for themselves. So I think...
Does having a good investment opportunity between countries, in general speaking, strengthen the relationship on a governmental and political level, or is it vice versa? Since you've been doing this economist business for quite some long time, how does it go? Is it the economy that would determine the good relations with governments, or vice versa? Do I have to have a good relationship with you on government and political level in order to deal with you economically?
I think the option
I know that's a
is
tricky
the first
question,
one,
and it's not in the script. So.
All wars were driven by the need to boost the local economy. Okay, so if at times of recession, okay, countries need to more output, factories need to produce, people need to work, so they can invent some kind of struggles or conflicts among other countries, so everybody's busy.
Yeah, well,
Everybody
there's
at
no
all
doubt.
levels.
There's no doubt that eyes are all on Africa, and Africa is the future. And as long as the resources are not going to be drilling off anymore, then that will make everybody happy on each end, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Hany Abou-El-Fotouh, economic expert, thank you very much for joining me
Pleasure.
this evening. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our episode of the Daily Debate. I'm Yasmin Bakir signing off. Thank you for watching.